Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faiza, and like I said earlier, I'm the president of the Student Aerospace Advisory Council here at UND, and I have the privilege of moderating the All Angles of the Industry panel tonight. So to get started, please introduce yourself and what career path are you on? And this question is for everybody.
All right. Well, let's raise the roof on this place, huh? Let's get a little excited about diversity. So my name is Joey Bisong. I'm a Delta Airlines first officer on the Boeing 757-767 based out of New York, living in Minnesota. Before that, I was at Atlas on the 747, and then before that, I was at SkyWest for 3.5 years. I love to get involved. You're going to hear more about it in my as we continue to talk, but love this event. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you, first of all, to the students that put this on. You guys are going to get thanked a lot. We really appreciate it. To the faculty that empowered them to do this, I know that takes a little bit of trust. We really appreciate it. I couldn't be more happy to be here and to be talking to everybody. And yeah, again, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tristan Rose. I live in Denver, Colorado, working at the United Airlines Flight Training Center on the Airbus 320 family. And I'm a graduate of Southern Illinois University, but don't take it out on me. So is Doug here. But you'll hear the rest of it later.
Good afternoon. We're going to try and push through your afternoon window of circadian low with this panel, so stay tuned. My name is Doug Carr. I live in Washington, D.C., and I have the great privilege of serving as NBAA's Senior Vice President of Operations, and that includes a whole lot of stuff that I've heard around here today, topics including safety, security, sustainability, which is hopefully something we'll talk about here in a little bit, and international operations. I have a great team that works for me to speak for our part of the industry in Washington in front of the FAA, TSA, other 3- and 4-letter organizations that play a significant role in the work that you all do and the work that my members do. Great to be here, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I do later.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Dorman. I am from Melbourne, Florida. I currently serve as a business development representative on behalf of Embraer's Executive Jet Business Unit. I may be a familiar face to some of you, and that's because just a few short months ago, I was actually spending my final days at UND in this very building, studying, cramming for finals as I graduated here just this past May. So it's exciting to see all you familiar faces and all these new faces as well, and I'm looking forward to being able to have a great fireside discussion with all of these wonderful individuals up here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Acevedo. I'm an active duty Air Force officer. My duty is airfield operations, so I oversee air traffic control, airfield management or base operations, and what the Air Force calls radar airfield weather system maintenance. It's a long word for we maintain the ILS. I am from Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I'm actually first generation American, so happy to be here and bring a unique perspective to this panel.
Hello. Okay. So what made you interested in your career path, and did you always see yourself doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different background, I think, from a lot of my classmates when I got up to UND. I forgot to mention that part. I am a UND grad, 2015 grad. When I left high school, I knew I wanted to be a politician. That was what I wanted to do, speaking like this. I was very drawn to it, but I quickly realized you have to have a lot of money to do that. So I went to a small little school, played football and baseball collegiately for 2 years. But at the same time, I got a job at the airport, the Minneapolis airport, as a Delta Airlines customer service agent, which is a long way to say a gate agent. And we were really utility above wing, so we were gate agents, we were baggage claim stuff, we did ticket office as well, and also we transported Delta's most important cargo, which is unaccompanied minors. So I got to pick up unaccompanied minor, bring them to the next gate. And it really got me interested in aviation, mainly because of the free flight benefits. That's really what I like the most. And I started trying to ask the pilots, hey, how can I get to where you are. And no one really seemed interested. And that's not a knock on the Delta Airlines pilots or anything. Obviously, I'm here now. But I think more they get asked it a lot, and I'm going to talk about it in a question later on about what we can do to help inspire the next generation. But they get asked a lot, and maybe they didn't think I was serious. But when we print off paperwork for the pilots, it's this long 10-foot scroll that spans this whole stage. And I noticed they would go to two places. They'd go to the block fuel, and I knew what that was because it says the words block fuel. But then they would go down further in the flight release to something that said METAR and TAF. I had no idea what it was. I mean, I had nobody in the industry. And I was like, okay, that's the key. So I went home. Google's a very powerful resource. Again, nobody in the family that knew how to fly or anything. And I figured out how to decode a METAR, how to decode a TAF. And so when the pilots would come to the gate now and I'd give them their paperwork, I'd give them like a very brief synopsis on what the weather was going to be at their time of arrival. And that would always get their attention. And at that point, I got their ear, and they all said, oh, you live in Minnesota? Just go to the University of North Dakota. So starting off right out of high school, I had no idea I wanted to do this. And this is where the representation matters. Things come in, because the first time I was like, maybe this is something I can do, was when I saw my first African-American pilot walking through the F concourse. I was working gate F10. I was boarding, and I saw him clean cut, had the swagger walk, the hat was on, the shoes were shined, and I'm like, I want to do that. And again, representation is so important. I didn't even know that somebody that looked like me could become a pilot. And I know that sounds cliche, but for many of you that are in here that are of a different diversity, you understand what I'm talking about. And that was a moment when I knew. So yeah, I didn't know that I wanted to be a pilot until I saw my first African-American Delta pilot, and here I am.
So the short answer, no. I didn't always know that I'd wanted to be a pilot, let alone that I would be at United at this point. So when I was younger, I grew up on a farm in southern Illinois. None of my family was in aviation at all, and so I didn't even know I knew about pilots, but I didn't know how you became one. So my goal at that point was to become a state police officer, because that's all we saw was police. But then eventually, my dad's friend paid for a vacation for us to go down to Cancun, and we flew on an old airline that used to exist called USA 3000, if any of you remember that one. So we took the ride down there, and I remember getting up in the flight deck, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And so then, of course, we did our vacation, we went back home, and then next year we were going to go too. And I was more excited about being on the airplane than I was being at the beach. So I think at that point, that's when I knew I wanted to be a pilot. So.
Stories that sound actually quite similar. I'm also a first-generation aviator, so to speak. I was born and raised in Hawaii, where aviation is the connecting tool to the other islands and to the mainland. 5 years old, I remember my first flight, a United Airlines 747-100 at the Hilo Airport, which is now served by a lot of different airlines, walking up the stairs into the airplane. There weren't any jet bridges at the time, carrying loads of supplies for a family of 4 and a new baby, going back to Illinois to visit our family. And I remember the very first time we took off, and it was an incredible feeling. And I remember asking myself, as a 5-year-old, you're trying to put it in terms that you understand, how many gears does this airplane have to go this fast? Just trying to internalize, how does this thing work? And I knew from that day on I was going to be a pilot. However, the journey to where I am today is, I mean, you're going to find this, is not necessarily as defined as you may want it to be. My family wasn't able to afford flight training for me, so I had to figure that out for myself. And the military became a very viable option for me. And I had a really good Navy recruiter who told me if I were to join the Navy's nuclear power program, that would get me into an airplane quicker than anything. He was a really good recruiter, and I wasn't as smart then as I am now. But I spent 6 years running the reactor on a nuclear-powered submarine, enjoyed some really crazy things that we did, but knew that if they weren't going to be able to let me be a pilot, it was time for me to find a way to do that. So separated from the Navy, did my 6 years, went to SIU, where I had a chance to meet Tristan many years later. And during my time there, you heard this during several of the other panels here, keeping your options open, looking at things that you may not have thought would have been part of your world. And I ended up taking an internship in Washington, D.C. for an aviation association, a different one that I'm working for now, and got to see that the ability to affect change, not just very granularly, but with national policy, with regulations, with the things that everybody here has to find a way to comply with. If we didn't like something, we had a voice to fix it. That was an experience I would never have thought was going to be something that I would be interested in. So I finished school, and before I was done with the internship, I had a job in Washington doing advocacy work, which to me was great fun, incredible fun. And so after 2 years there, I found my way over to the company I'm at now, the National Business Aviation Association, where advocacy is my primary job there. Talking to FAA, talking to TSA, talking to Customs and Border Protection and their counterparts across the globe is an incredibly satisfying line of work, because I'm sure many of us have lots of perspectives about rules we like, rules we don't like. 91-211, can anyone name that rule off the top of their heads? 91-211, supplemental oxygen requirements above 41,000 feet. Business aircraft quite frequently travel above 41,000 feet. But when was the last time you heard anybody talking through a mask on the radio? It's probably the most violated rule on the books. FAA acknowledges it, industry acknowledges it. How are we going to fix this? So we're actually pretty close to getting a fix. And it's that kind of work that drives me. Our success isn't measured in days and weeks. I can't look at my job day to day and say, this is what I've accomplished. It's measured in weeks and months and years sometimes. But when the wins happen, they're big. And they're great to celebrate, because it's not just me, it's a whole team, it's a whole industry that's out there pushing for change. And that is what gets me up every morning to go to work. And I never thought I'd be here, but I'm very glad that this is where I am today.
Very well said, Doug. So to answer the question, you could have asked me 2 years ago, would I have seen myself in the business aviation realm? And the answer would have been no. That is because when I began my collegiate career here at UND, I had the aspirations of being an airline pilot, and I actually started out in the commercial aviation program. Through some hardships, there were some behavioral changes where I had to step up and begin to support myself in a more full manner, and it actually ended up opening doors for me and uncovering skill sets that I truly didn't know I had possessed, and a lot of that was in the sales realm. I started out as a server early in my years at UND, and as many of you know that have probably worked in the food industry, it's not the most fun. And I decided that it was time for a change, and it was at that point that I actually landed my first sales job at a Verizon store here in town. And it was there that I kind of really discovered that I love that face-to-face interaction, and I love being able to talk about a product and to sell a product to an individual. And that's where, come winter of 2020, I had the privilege of taking AVIT 407, which was a class with Dan Malott, General Aviation Management and Operations, and it was at that point that I had a paradigm shift in my career expectations, and I decided to change my major to aviation management. And it was at that point that I began my pursuit in networking and just expanding opportunities to get my foot into the doors at OEM specifically. And I had set a goal that I was going to work for an OEM, and I was going to try my best to set myself up for success doing so. And I was fortunate enough to be granted an opportunity right after I graduated to go straight to Embraer and do what I'm doing today. So.
Yeah, so growing up, first generation opportunities for me were very limited. My parents immigrated from Colombia in the early 2000s, and I didn't gain my citizenship till I was 19 years old. So college was never something that I thought would be an opportunity for me. It was not something that was in my purview, so I was actually going to enlist into the Air Force. And my sister, and I'm grateful to her for doing this, sat me down and said, hey, Laura, I really think you should go to college. I think you should try. I know we can't afford it, but I think you should take out a loan and at least try. So I went to Rutgers University, and I studied criminal justice and sociology. And now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how did you end up in a uniform, and how did you end up in the aviation industry? And it was one of those catchy Air Force recruiting videos where I saw somebody marching a flight at BMT, and I thought, wow, I would love the opportunity to be a part of something greater than my parents could ever see us doing. And so I tried to enlist, and instead I got picked up by the ROTC program, and I said, okay, my senior year comes around, what am I gonna do? I don't wanna fly, but how do I get as close to the airfield as possible where I get to affect the flying mission every day? And that was airfield operations. It was my first choice. It was realistically the only thing I wanted, and I was lucky enough to be granted that opportunity because of some really amazing mentors. So yeah.
My next question is for Joy and Laura. If you could give yourself, younger self advice, what would it be?
Yeah, this has been spoken about, and I'm really going to give the advice as to when I was in college. I think one of the things we get lost in as college students, and this part is important, but you are always trying to, as it pertains to networking, you're always trying to network with those people where you want to be, such as myself, for you, and when I was in your seats, the same thing. Anybody in a uniform, I was going to be the first one in line to try to talk to them. And that's well and good, and it's great, but I would say the people that you're sitting next to in this room, whether they be at UND or at Purdue or anywhere, there's a lot of social media things that can drive networking right now. And I think I had more letters of recommendation to get to my dream job, quote unquote, from my fellow people that I went to university with than I did those people that I met that were in the uniforms when I was in your seats. So really try your best to make yourself uncomfortable. I know somebody else spoke about it, Sue was speaking about it. Sit by somebody that you don't know. It's super important, and I wish I would have done more of that. I had my small little group, but I didn't expand that group. And unfortunately, some people, and this is the inclusion piece, some people don't have the same skills that you might have as far as talking to other people. So make sure if you see somebody, and I know this sounds cliche, walking around by themselves or they don't seem to have many friends, to try to bring them in. And I didn't do a great job of that, to be honest. I did get involved. I know some people said that they wish they had gotten more involved. I was very involved with a lot of different organizations, but I didn't make those meaningful relationships. And it went so far as to, this is one of my biggest regrets to date, and I'm willing to share it, is when I got to my regional, Sky West, there was an individual in my new hire class who was just struggling. And this, I'm going to answer this later when we talk about how does UND prepare. But I was with my core friends in my class, and we never brought that individual into our group, and that individual didn't make it through training. And I know if I would have just brought them into our group for one of our study sessions, things would have been much different for that individual. So again, please do your best to try to network horizontally, not always vertically, as I talk about a lot, because it really is going to make a difference, and you never know who you're sitting next to. Somebody might get through everything quick, and now they're the CEO of an airline that you want to be at, or that's an extreme example, but it's very important to network horizontally as well.
Yeah, well said. I think for me, the one piece of advice that I would give my younger self would be, don't give up. And I know it sounds cliche and I know it sounds simple, but there are so many obstacles that are going to stand in your day daily, whether it be making that next qualification or passing that next test or getting to that next class. There's always going to be obstacles in the way, and having the energy to get up every day and say, no, I'm going to give this my best shot is the one thing that I wish somebody would have told me sooner. Don't give up on your dreams and dream as big as you want to dream, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. I had a guidance counselor when I was in high school said, Laura, you're never going to make it in the Air Force, and gave me the recruiting card to the Army and said, you are not meant to join that industry. You are not meant to do anything with aviation. And I said, okay, let me prove you wrong. And here I am. So don't give up on your dreams, ever.
What are some barriers that you overcame to achieve your goals? Tristan, if you want to start.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I knew I wanted to become a pilot at about 14 years old. So I started doing some research, and I was like, okay, this isn't cheap. Coming from a family who doesn't have much money, I was like, how am I going to make this work? So when I turned 16, McDonald's had an open hiring day. So showed up to McDonald's with my best suit, got the job, and I eventually became a manager there for 2 years. And once I had enough of that, because the food industry can be wearing at times, so be nice to your food industry people. Once I got done with that at 18, I moved on to AMC Theaters, and I became a general manager there. I say it's a barrier. I know many of you have jobs while in college, but and you probably did exactly what I did. I remember leaving high school, going to the McDonald's job, and I got out of school at 3, and I began work at 3:30, so I'd race over to my job, change in the back of my car, throw on my uniform, and then go inside and work until midnight, and then do it all again the next day. I commonly worked over 40-hour weeks. I don't know how that was illegal, but I did it, and I saved up money. Same thing at AMC when I was there talking about financials. I worked a lot there as well. When I got promoted to general manager, I was there 50-hour weeks while also working on my CFI. So I really don't know how I made that happen, but I did. But I know it's a barrier that a lot of us faced in one way or another, and you're probably facing now. So break through it, find a way over it, find a way around it, but don't let it stop you.
I'll kind of add to that. I think that everyone can kind of come to a conclusion that we all kind of go through a journey, and we all have these challenges that are presented against us, and none of us in this room actually truly go through the exact same thing. We might go through similar instances. Financially, that's a big one. Finances is huge, especially in the aviation world, because it costs money to go and make money. So, but one thing I want to touch on is from an inclusion standpoint. I think that one of the biggest barriers for me starting out was doubt, and that was a mental barrier. One of my first instructors actually told me very explicitly that I would have to work twice as hard to accomplish the same things as those around me that didn't have the same skin tone as me. And that spoke in volumes to me, and it really kind of captivated me to truly, work harder and to not absorb doubt in a negative manner, but instead take it in and turn it into drive. Take someone's doubt and then turn it into something positive and prove people wrong. And that's one of the things that really helped me with success, is proving people wrong and turning that doubt into beaming success.
So the Air Force has this thing called the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, and it's another fancy way of saying it's an aptitude test. And for many people, it's very easy to take. You go, you take it, and you pass. For me, that wasn't the case. You are only allowed to take this test twice in your life, and I failed twice. So what did that mean for me? It means I would have to pursue a waiver, and it meant getting up every morning at 4:45 and pursuing tutoring to improve English proficiency skills that I previously didn't possess. So I'd get my car, I would blast "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor, and I would get myself to tutoring. And if there's anything you take away from that, it's that I could have not been in front of you today. I could have failed, and I could have been sitting somewhere else doing something else. But I got up every day and I tried, and I could live with the fact that if I failed again, that it just wasn't meant to be. But it wasn't from a lack of effort. It wasn't going to be from a lack of trying. It wasn't going to be from a lack of staying in bed longer or choosing to do something else. It was going to be because it wasn't meant to be. So get up every morning and give it your all. Give whatever barrier is in front of you, make the decision that's going to make you be okay with whatever happens after that. So if that means getting up and studying, getting up and pursuing tutoring, getting up and putting your ego aside to do the thing that's going to get you to the goal, then do that.
Since we students are the future of aviation, how can we keep progressing diversity and inclusion in the industry? Joey?
Yeah, I kind of talked about this a little bit with my story. And again, this is as you progress through, and this is all angles of the industry panel. So I'm going to mainly be talking to the pilots in the group. Just remember, and I see it time and time again, I saw it as a gate agent, I see it now as a line pilot. There's a lot of pilots that forget about what we're wearing and what that means to individuals that you're walking by in the terminals. And I understand sometimes we're trying to catch a commute or we're running between flights or whatever the reasons are, it's a go-home leg or whatever. Just remember, when you guys put on the uniform, those that want to go to the airlines, if you have a moment to try to make an impression on these individuals. I try to, my best. Delta gives us these little cards that have the airplane on it and has a little fax on the back. And before the international flights that I do, I try to find some kids in the gate area to try to give it to them, and they just light up. And I know from doing when I was an interviewer at SkyWest, and now I'm on the Propel team at Delta, I know from pilots that I talk about, or that I talk to, they tell me their stories, and a lot of the times the spark that they got to do what they're doing was because there was a pilot that gave them a set of those plastic wings, or gave them a little card, or said, here, come up to the flight deck and I'll show you how all the lights turn on. A lot of those times, those impressions are huge for the industry coming on. And as we talk about diversity and how we can get more diverse flight decks, I think a lot of it is grassroots amongst us. We're the ones that need to do it. You can throw as much money at it as you want, but it's up to us going out there and trying to inspire the next generation. And again, this may be the next step, or even as flight instructors, I know there's individuals that look up to you, especially freshmen like we've talked about, but please, when you get to the airline of your choice, don't forget about those people that are seeing you walk through that terminal, because you are going to have an impression on them. So that's how I think we can foster diversity, especially those that are of, in different diverse groups. Just remember that moving forward.
What changes could be made, or changes that are happening in the industry that we should know, Doug?
Well, we could potentially spend an entire panel just talking about changes in the industry because there's so much of it happening right now. As we look to the industry itself, I know we've talked a lot about airline careers. They're great, they're exciting, they pay really well, great benefits. I think broadly in aviation, 1 in 10 jobs involves flying an airplane or a helicopter or some form of flying. The rest of aviation is filled with very passionate people who do something other than fly. And guess what? They're all part of the team. They're all needed to do the job. We need great maintainers. We need great cabin crew. We need great air traffic controllers and inspectors and customer service folks and policy people, even people who work for the FAA and TSA. They're all part of the equation here. We need a great team that looks to what do we as an industry need to do. And with that, we've got new entrants coming into the industry today that I think are going to fundamentally transform what we know of aviation today. Was it just yesterday, Delta announced a $60 million investment in Joby. Joby is building an electric air taxi. Delta wants to connect passengers from New York and LA to their final destination, not just to their last airport, but to their home, to their hotel. Why are they traveling? Where do they need to go? And how do we become part of that total travel solution? Electric aviation is here. We expect to see air taxis, electric air taxis, starting in 2024. When we look at drone technology, drone deliveries, pilotless aircraft, I hate to say that in a room full of pilots, but at some point, we're probably going to see a component of that in some portion of the industry. There is so much change right now, and you all are at the precipice of seeing a lot of this change. Keep educated on what's happening in the industry. That's probably one of your best tools. Just be aware of what's happening beyond focusing on licenses, which is very important, focusing on your studies, very important, but just be aware of what your industry is doing. How is it changing, and what does that mean for you? You may find yourself at the end of your time here choosing to pursue something else than when you started. I know I did. I thought I was going to fly something with 2 decks and 4 engines when I got to Southern Illinois University, but I left doing something completely different because I found a passion in it and a real opportunity. And for all of us, it means bringing what we're talking about here today into those different parts of the industry. I think on the flight deck, there's a great amount of awareness of what DE&I means, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to safety. That's a big deal. Well, guess what? It also has a big deal to do with every other part of the industry as well. If we have maintainers that can't talk to each other or feel excluded or aren't doing their job because of how they're being treated, guess what? That means an oil filter isn't torqued right, or we've got a test that isn't completed according to what the specs say it's supposed to be. If we've got cabin crew that aren't getting along with each other, it all plays a big role in terms of how we as an industry are perceived and survive and thrive. So we all have a role to play in spreading the value of DE&I beyond just the flight deck to the entire industry. I think one of the things that I hear about when it comes to DE&I is, what is it to you? That to me is a huge component of why I'm here. When we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, what is it? These are just Doug's views. Diversity is being seen. We need to see people that don't look like us in the room. Equity is making sure there's balance, that we've got all the people we need in the room. But here's, I think, the kicker. Inclusion is not just being seen, but inclusion is being heard. You have to be part of the discussion. You have to have your voices included in what's being discussed about, because your views are going to help make the final product better, whatever that is. So DE&I is very relevant everywhere in aviation. I'm glad you all are here, because this is why I am here, to make sure that business aviation, commercial aviation, general aviation, space, the military, everybody sees the value of what we're trying to do here today.
Did you have a mentor that impacted your career?
Yeah, so it took me a while to figure out which one I wanted. I was very fortunate to have a lot of mentors. But the one that comes to mind every time I'm asked that question is when I was an intern at United. I was working in our network operations center in Chicago, in Willis Tower or Sears Tower, whatever you want to call it. And I showed up, and they're like, "Hey, Tristan, let's take a look at your resume. We'll go ahead and clean it up." I walked up, and him and another FODM, Flight Operations Duty Manager, that I worked with, they just grabbed my resume and just threw it in the trash. They're like, "We're going to start this again." And so at that point, I definitely felt like I had imposter syndrome, since that term is being thrown around. And so to help fix that, one day I was approached by him and said, "Hey, I've got something to do," and he just disappears after this. "I've got something to do, but I need you to look into this issue that we had on the Airbus today, and they had a green hydraulic failure or something like that." And I was like, "I'm just an intern, and I've only flown a Cessna, so what's green hydraulics? And I've only ever seen it be one color." So I had to run around the NOC to figure out what this even meant and figure it out. And as soon as I got done with it, write a report so it could be sent up to our senior vice president of yada, 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 some big title. And so the big thing behind it was that even though I may not have knew anything about the green hydraulic system on the Airbus, he really wanted to show me that I was there for a reason, and I actually knew something. I was a part of the team. So he really showed me that even if I didn't know what I was doing, I could totally figure it out. And I definitely did not have that. I didn't have that in the past, that thought process. So.
What do you recommend students to do to continue advocating for representation in aviation and other STEM fields?
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So recently, well, a year ago, I experienced a scenario where I walked into a room and the leader gave everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves, and they skipped over me. And well, at first I was like, oh, honest mistake. But then in few words, they went on to say how I wasn't of value to the conversation. So what do you do in that scenario? I'm not one of those people that, as stated earlier, can answer things right away or can react right away. So I set up a meeting, and I chose to educate that individual about why that wasn't okay and their impact to the other people in the room that were minorities. Now you can't change who a person is, but you can choose to have the hard conversation. So I could have easily walked away and said nothing, but instead I took an active role in trying to make a difference. So when you enter an organization, find a few things that you want to change, and don't wait for somebody else to do it. Be the person that makes that change. It could be something small as you know, this procedure is not working. Here's a better way that we could do a procedure. Or you can stand up and do something about a systemic problem and choose not to be another silent voice, but rather to take the hard path of confrontation. So my advice is to do the right thing even if it's hard. Find something and change it even when it's hard.
So for the UND alumni, how will the UND prepare you for the real world?
Yeah, so this is definitely switching gears a little bit. Nothing really to do with DE&I, but I do love talking about this. When I was sitting in your seats as a UND individual, this pertains to 141 schools, so I'll shout out the Purdue folks in the room too. When you're sitting at your university and you see your Ames account, that's our financial account, you see it dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping, you can somewhat lose sight of what UND is doing for you in the moment. And it wasn't until at Salt Lake City with my buddy that went to UND next to me that we went through the first week, and on the last day of the last week, we looked at each other and we were like, oh, that's why we went to UND. So you're going to understand it when you get to the airline of your choice. And again, I know I'm talking to the pilots in the groups, but I'm sure Darren can attest to his field as well. But again, you're not going to realize it till you get to the airlines, but with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man's Uncle Ben said. Just remember, when you guys go on into the workforce, and I don't mean to be negative here, but just remember the badge that it carries when you say you went to UND, and the way that you treat other individuals, specifically your trainers and the captains that you fly with, because there have been individuals who have gone on and give UND and maybe the school in the South a bad stigma. So don't be that individual, because again, when you get to your airline, you guys are going to see very easily how well UND did to prepare you. And that's just a 141 thing. I'm a little biased. I think UND does it better. But all 141 schools, their entire purpose is to prepare you for the number 20 digits less than that, 121. So again, I know it's hard to see right now, but when you guys move on into whatever career field you get to go to, specifically for me, pilots, you are really going to see the incredible benefits that UND gave to you.
That was very well said. I would just like to add to that. In addition, I would say that one of the most resourceful tools that UND gave to me was the power of networking, and it's each and every individual. I think it's safe to say that you could consider UND as an Ivy League institution in comparison to a flight school. So, you know, you say that with a lot of pride because it is a fantastic school for any aviation-related program, and it is saturated with individuals who are like-minded and who have the same goals and the same passion within the industry. And it makes it easy to realign your focus if for some reason you ever lose sight of the big picture in what you're working towards. I think that it's been nice and resourceful to work along people who might be going through the same struggles as you, and to be able to relate and to work together to get to your end goal, whatever that may be. And some of my best friends, of course, they're pilots. It's one of the big things about UND is it's a large institution, and there are people outside of aviation. So it really just opens doors to networking, and especially being in the business aviation realm, there are people who aren't even relative to the aviation industry who I've connected with who are still a part in some way, and it truly does. Aviation connects people, whether you want to think of it as that way or not. It's a small world when you put it into perspective, and UND has definitely prepared me for success at Embraer, and it has shown that it's evident that UND pushes out quality talent.
I'm going to offer that for the Purdue folks in the room, for the Salukis in the room, for the other aviation schools in the room, whatever place you're at is probably where you're supposed to be. There are a number of great schools out there. I know Tristan and I love to rely on our Saluki network. The SU network is great as well. Whatever school you're at is going to have a great network. Tap into it, be part of it. Those are the relationships that are going to be important for you beyond school, regardless of what they're in, what they end up doing, regardless of what part of the industry they're in. Those relationships are important. As we heard earlier today, maintaining them is important. I talk to many more people on a regular basis from my college years than I do from high school. I think I may have one person from high school that I actually am still in touch with. I went to 3 high schools over 4 years, so that's a part of it. But when I look back on where those relationships begin, college is a big part of it, and so many of them remain a very active part of my life today.
What would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a DEI program, Doug?
We've dealt with this at NBAA. Most, if not all of the airlines are dealing with that today. Probably one of the things that frequently starts the conversation is, why do we need to do this? What's the value of doing this? And that frequently is where the conversation starts. What's the value of devoting time, energy, resources to investing in DE&I? And it's the conversations you're hearing about today that are the real output of that. What do we get for investing in it? What do we get for going to events like OBAP, Women in Aviation, PAPA, LPA, NGPA? What are the benefits of us showing up there? And it's because that kind of inclusion and diversity means you as a company are going to be more reflective of the issues that their customers are bringing to the table. They're going to have greater diversity of thought. You're not going to have singular ways of thinking that, again, dating myself here, prior to CRM, in the view that the authority gradient in the flight deck was somewhat at 85, 90 degrees. We all know we're better now because of that. So even within NBAA, business aviation, we still got a ways to go in terms of what DE&I means for us, but we're making progress. We're having the conversations. We're understanding what that means. You never know at an opportunity such as Oshkosh, which I hope all of you get a chance to go to at some point, where you're going to have somebody come along and stroke a check for $5 million to buy a plane because they can. You never know where those people are going to be. So having the opportunity to use those engagements as opportunities for our industry, for our connectivity, for our network, helps. When we think about DE&I, it helps you be a great representative of your industry, whatever part of it that you're in. There's a long way to go, and I think it would be great for all of us in 10 years not to have to talk about this anymore. Not that I don't want to, but when DE&I becomes part of our culture, like CRM, like FOQA, like other tools that we've embraced over the years, we will have achieved something really great.
And this will be my final question before we open it up to everyone. So this will be for everyone. What does this event mean for you, and what would be your biggest piece of advice for students getting ready for their careers? Joey, you can start.
Yeah, sure. I've kind of been answering this as I've been going, but what this event means to me, and again, I just want to thank everybody that did it. That's really the first thing, is that I want to make sure that I give kudos where kudos are due. But I think one of the things that I'm thinking about when we do this is sometimes I think diversity should be fun, personally. Like, diversity should be a fun topic, but unfortunately, just because of the nature of the past, it becomes somewhat negative. And we get kind of into the negative stories, and I think someone spoke about it. Just remember, and this kind of goes to the last question as well, just remember diversity can be a fun topic, and it's cool to get to hear the different things. And when I hear somebody that says something negative to me, it's basically just my nature. I want to prove them wrong, or if I see people talking on Facebook, this is how African American pilots fly or whatever, I really want to prove them wrong, and I think that goes into us trying to double as hard or what have you. But I guess my takeaway is, let's try to make this fun. I think diversity should be fun. I understand we need to unpack things that have happened in the past and talk about negative experiences, but in the end, I think we need to make this a fun thing. Because I think that will create retention as far as people wanting to continue, and maybe we try not to preach as much. So again, love this event. I think it's great. Thank you for moderating this. So happy. I hope I get to keep talking with you as this comes to a close, but that's what I've taken from it.
Yeah, so my biggest takeaway from this event would be, and what I want you all to take away from it, is that don't let it stop here at UND. It should spread. I was just talking about it at my table prior to coming up here. This university clearly does a very good job at promoting DE&I, but don't let it stop here. Let it move outside of UND. Let it move to Grand Forks and beyond. Ever since you started at least flight training, and I hate to keep it on the pilot topic, but ever since you began flight training, we told you SOP and don't deviate from it. And so telling a pilot what I'm about to tell you, that you should take risks and be okay with that when it doesn't come to flying, is a good thing. I lead the university chapters along with Charlie Williams for NGPA, and we just had a new university chapter start up at Oklahoma University. And the new student president that started it called me and said, I'm a little nervous because we don't have anything like this on campus, and the local area just isn't accepting to this. And I said, that's exactly why we're there. So I would take that and be okay with risk. Sometimes it's really good.
This is probably a multifaceted answer for me. First and foremost, I think being here is an opportunity to invest in our future aviation leaders, letting you all see pathways that we took, the options that are out there, the diversity of everybody that's up here today. Hopefully you found yourself in one of the speakers that we have here today. Knowing, as Joey said, seeing somebody do what he wanted to do was a big spark for him in his career pathway. So hopefully you're seeing somebody over the course of the day here that you identify with and you want to align with in terms of opportunities that are out there. I think the second is also just in general an opportunity to give back, because at some point we all find a way to be comfortable in our day-to-day jobs, but there's a calling to do more. So figuring out what that giving back opportunity looks like. I get to serve on the board of NGPA. It's great to see the work that organization is doing, and being a proud member of it really is very, very satisfying. And so figuring out how do we continue to give back, how do we continue to do more, it really is a big drive of mine, knowing that schedules are tight, resources are thin, but wanting to keep finding that way. Coming to events like this really is a high value proposition for me to connect with people, make relationships that will last beyond our one opportunity here to see each other, into a position where at some point maybe I can be a resource for you moving down the road in your own careers. Thanks.
I will diversify the answer so that it doesn't sound the same as everyone else's, and I will just say this much. But again, being a recent graduate and knowing that this event is the second of its kind, and this is all within less of a year, to see the unification of the student body come together to promote diversity and inclusion, and to see these student organizations come together and create such a spectacular event that opens many doors and many eyes to everyone, it's truly amazing to see and witness. And I think that even the scale of it being the second event, you know, it's amazing to see. Nothing like this ever existed in my early college career, and to see it now, my biggest piece of advice is to just keep it going, and you know, to grow each year. What you're doing is fantastic, and I am so happy to be back here. So thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't thank Sarah from GFK Tower for inviting me to do this. It's a full circle moment for me. So if you would have asked me 8 years ago as a freshman, do you see yourself speaking in front of a room of 100+ people and talking about the career that you have? And so the answer would have been no. No, and no, just straight no. And I'm, earlier they talked about the saying yes to opportunities. So a month ago, I said, yeah, I'll go do that. And then it turned into this amazing thing where sometimes it's enough to walk into the room and be the representation that you never had. And then other times it's to take active action to put on an event like this. I wish I had an event like this when I was in college. I wish the Air Force had events like this now to talk about hard conversations, but also, as Joey said, have fun with it. And so keep up. It's hard being on this side of the panel, but to keep up with the difficult things and keep having those fun conversations and those hard conversations. Thank you.
The great thing, if I could offer, for any of you who have been to one of the diversity events that are out there, they all have an annual meeting. How many of them aren't fun? I think they're all pretty fun events for you all to go to. So if you have a chance to get to see one of them, go to them. They're wonderfully enriching opportunities to connect, to learn, to grow, and they're just a buttload of fun. So find a way to get to one of them that are out there.
With that, does anyone have any questions?
I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. But how, as leaders of our organizations, do we promote other angles of the industry that is not just piloting to our members, like show them the other side of the industry?
I think acknowledging that those other parts of the industry exist is an easy thing to do. And to find leaders from those parts of the industry and bring them in to talk. I can't imagine it would be that hard to find people representing the diversity of aviation careers that, in this case, are from UND to come in and talk. Those are easy things to connect with. And I think the network that you're going to find here will make it easy to find those people who are leaders in aviation maintenance and design, those leaders in air traffic control, the leaders in general and business aviation who can highlight the diversity of this great industry we're in called aviation to help satisfy your question of just showing that while piloting is great, and I'm glad I am one and I'm glad I get to fly, it's not the day job. But there's a lot of passion that's out there that really can be directed in any direction you want to satisfy that aviation itch. So call on us to be a resource if you've got a need.
Thank you for being here today. I just had a question on, we talked about challenges and barriers into being able to enter the industry, and now that you have all established careers within the industry, are there any challenges or barriers that are relating around diversity that you just maybe didn't expect that were there now being in the industry, something new that maybe you're facing now that would be good for us to know, like for us, like once we are in the industry, that we should be maybe aware of, or maybe things that we should think about, as we pursue our careers?
I think they've done a really good job at trying to weed out that kind of negative connotations, the negative stigmas, what have you. And so I personally haven't seen anything really in the airlines. It was a little awkward after George Floyd, everything that went on with that. I could definitely tell there were some targeted questions trying to get into that conversation on the flight deck. But I think that was just a momentary lapse in a lot of people's flight deck etiquette, if you will. And so I was having to do a little bit of weaving around the questions. But those kind of things, when things happen in the greater United States, when that kind of stuff happens, or around election time, you're going to start to see individuals that have very spirited points of view try to get certain things out of individuals that are African Americans or whatever the group may be. But especially during George Floyd was the only time that, or right after, and then the riots and all that kind of stuff, I was definitely feeling the heat because I knew the questions wanted to be there. And it was just something like, if they were bringing it up in the flight deck, I'd say, hey, why don't we wait till the overnight if you really want to get into this? And I don't mind talking about that. If you remember, I said I wanted to be a politician. So I don't mind talking about it later, but in the flight deck, it's not a good spot. So I guess just be aware of what's going on in the world, especially when you start flying international too. That can also be an issue when you're talking with the gate agents or whatever. But to answer your question, I think the organizations in the room, the leaders have done a great job at getting rid of that kind of thing. And I think CRM plays a part of that as well. Great question.
Yeah, so it's hard to answer because thankfully, now that we have all of these organizations that are hosting this today, you all are knocking down the barriers very quickly, and it's really good to see. I remember the barrier I had, at least, so maybe you could relate to it. was that when I came out, my parents' biggest concern was, okay, you're gay, so how are you going to work in this industry that you want to go to, because they know not many people are. Well, they thought there weren't that many. So I'd say that that was really the biggest barrier, was proving to people that it doesn't matter your race, ethnicity, who you love, etc., that we could all be a part of it.
I would like to thank you all again for being a part of this panel. I really enjoyed working with you all, and thanks for being here from all of us at UND.